Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today I've got a small pile of stuff to show you. Cool things I've picked up, indie comics from Kickstarter, some cool fantasy comics from the 1980s, and I've also got a couple books that I've picked up. So, not a huge haul today, but I wanted to show you this stuff. Before I dive into it, I just want to remind you that my current fantasy comic quest is live on Kickstarter right now, just for another week. So you can check that out. The link's down below. That's quest number 4. And if you missed the first 3 issues, there's bundles you can catch up physically or digitally on the entire epic fantasy saga. But speaking of Kickstarter, let's dive into some of the stuff that I've gotten today, because I have some books delivered from Kickstarter that I'm curious to read myself, and I thought some of you might find interesting. From Green Archer Comics, here is the Press Guardian #1. Now, the Press Guardian is actually a golden age public domain character. You know how much I love working with those in my own comics, so I was excited to see this. In the original version, there was a guy who was a defender of free press, and that's basically what this is. His granddaughter is now picked up the mantle of the Press Guardian and is defending the free press. This had a lot more political content than I was expecting, although given the premise, I suppose I should have expected it. It had a lot of stuff to do with like Eastern European politics and the war in Ukraine and stuff like that. So it was definitely a heady read, but I love it when people bring back public domain characters in general, specifically public domain superheroes from the golden age of comics, but more specifically when they sort of update those characters to be sort of relevant to the modern audiences. Obviously, I enjoy it when they just use the character as is from the golden age as well. But when there's a good update to show why those characters are still relevant to us today, I really appreciate it. So this is a cool book. I'm looking forward to seeing what else they might do with the Press Guardian in the future. Now, this series I actually don't know much about. I don't actually know much about the creators either. But the art looks good, so we'll see how this is. It's War Lion #1. I actually got both issues so far of War Lion. It had a good deal for Kickstarter books. You can see that it is priced at $9.99. They both are, but they are 48 full color pages, so I think you get a pretty decent value for it. Again, I haven't actually read it yet, and I don't know too much about the creators. But here's War Lion #1 and War Lion #2. Even though I don't know much about the creators or what the story is about or anything like that, I can tell that it's a well put together package. You know, things can be very varied here in the world of indie self-published comics and indie creators and stuff like that. So I have all sorts of things, and I'm definitely not a snob when it comes to production values. Even though I try to have my comics be as high a production value as possible to make it look as professional as possible. There's also something charming about people that are just, making comics in their basement and, have all sorts of wacky, weird things with formats and fonts and stuff like that. It's kind of, the DIY aspect I like. But these, very professional. And again, both issues are 48 pages, so I've got 96 pages of War Lion to dig into here at some point. So I'm interested to learn more about what this comic actually is, and to see whether I like that or not. So I've got some more stuff coming from Kickstarter, but with Kickstarter, it just trickles in at weird times. You just never know when it's going to show up. I mean, the individual creators, most of them, it's important for me so that everyone that's backed one of my books know exactly when it's coming. But when you back a lot of these Kickstarters, it's sort of like this one might be 3 months, this might be 6 months, this one might be 2 weeks. And so the time from when you receive the book to when you backed it is so different from one to the next that you never know what's going to show up in the mail if you back a lot of them like I do. And it's actually kind of exciting where it'll be like, oh, something showed up in the mail today. Oh, it's a comic book. and then it's, you know, something that you backed on Kickstarter. So don't know when the next batch of stuff from Kickstarter is going to come in. Usually when I'm live, like I am right now, I end up backing a bunch of books because I'm seeing them all as I'm doing stuff on Kickstarter. And then, you know, a couple months later, they start coming in. So I'm sure next video, there'll be more of that. But here's something that I bought off of eBay. And it is kind of related to Kickstarter because with my Epic Fantasy Series Quest, you know, big inspiration for me are the classic Bronze Age fantasy comics of the 70s and early 80s. Conan, Red Sonja, Savage Sword Conan, Warlord, big ones. It occurred to me there was one that I actually had when I was a kid. I had one issue of this series, and it's about strong female warriors, which is great because my comic has, you know, the main character is a female paladin. And so I was like, I need to get this and read it because it's been so long. So here it is. Some of you may have already guessed what I was talking about. From 1984-85, it's Sisterhood of Steel. Now, this was from Epic Comics, which was the Marvel's imprint where they were publishing creator-owned books. So in the early 80s, Marvel and DC were both getting a lot of competition from the new wave of publishers that were taking advantage of the direct market. That was like Eclipse, First Comics, people like that, right? And so to answer that, Marvel created Epic Comics. The idea was you still have the creative rights to your characters, but you have the benefit of Marvel's publishing arm and distribution and marketing and stuff as a power behind you. In some ways, it's a similar precursor kind of to Image Comics, actually, where there's an imprint here that distributes the books for you, but you still have creative control, or at least you're supposed to have creative control. So this series only ran 8 issues, and I got the entire run, so I'm going to show you all 8 of them. Because what ended up happening was there was some editorial interference. Creator was Christy Marks, was the writer, and the artist was Mike Vosberg, who some of you may know from his other works in the 70s and 80s. And my understanding is that the editors, now Archie Goodwin was the editor-in-chief, but basically the creative team here of Christy Marks and Mike Vosberg, they wanted to have some adult content of some kind. I don't know exactly what in the series, and because it was being published by Marvel, they weren't allowed to. And so after 8 issues, they ended the series so they could try and go find a distribution deal with someone else, because they weren't being allowed to actually do in their own series what they wanted to do. So here is issue 2. That distribution deal with another publisher, whether it would have been First or Eclipse or something, we don't know, because it never really happened. I mean, we kind of know, because actually after this there was a one-shot graphic novel that was printed, but I don't have that one yet, so that's still on my radar to get. But in terms of an ongoing series, it kind of fizzled out just as it was getting going, and it just never came back together. So it was quite cheap, actually, for me to get the entire run. Here's issue 6. And basically, this series takes a lot of stuff from Wonder Woman, or more specifically, from a lot of the sort of myths and tropes that Wonder Woman was drawing from when they created Wonder Woman. So it's about, there's an island that's all women, so it's very sort of Amazonian. And the women are all trained from birth to be warriors. And then they sort of act sort of as mercenaries, not exactly, but it's a little unclear. But they're sort of like their own little city-state, like if you can imagine, you know, the Mediterranean, and they're working from their island base, so like Malta or Cyprus or whatever. So there's a lot of naval stuff in here, and etc., etc. And so the main character is this woman who's being trained. She's this young woman who's just sort of getting to the point where she has to go through the trials of womanhood to like become an official member of the Sisterhood of Steel, one of the warriors, and et cetera, et cetera, the stuff that she goes through. So there is a lot of sort of Wonder Woman meets the world of Conan is kind of what it's like. This issue here, 7, this is the one that I actually had when I was a kid. So it's cover dated December 85. So I would have bought this in the fall of 85. This is the only one of these that has any kind of adult content, and it's just there's a scene where one of the characters, it's a flashback scene even, where one of the characters is in bed with this guy and they're naked, but there's nothing explicit. There's not really even any nudity. There is one other scene in here where we see someone that's partially nude, who's been sort of like captured by slavers. And it hints at some very dark stuff. But then that's never followed up on because the series ends. A great deal of the series, the first several issues are all about her like going through the trials and getting her first mission as one of the Sisterhood, but then like she's immediately framed because there's all this infighting within the Sisterhood of Steel, and there's these different factions. So there's a lot of internal politics of the organization, and not actually that much action. And there's not that much like epic fantasy. There's a lot of world building, but specifically like the relationships between the different women within the group is sort of the focus of the series, which is interesting, but it's not what you might expect, given the premise, right? Other fantasy series at the time, you would expect a lot more action. So it was interesting. Like I said, after this, there is a one-shot graphic novel, which I don't have yet, but I'm hopefully going to pick it up soon. So I'm curious to see what it is. Because the series really feels like it's just getting started when it ends, and I don't think they can really even wrap everything up in the graphic novel because they've barely set it up. So I'm not really sure how that's going to go, but really excited to get those. And sort of there was a couple things that stuck in my head as a 11-year-old buying that issue 7, and the only scene I remember was the woman semi-naked in bed. Hey, what can I say? But I've forgotten everything else about the series, so I was excited to revisit that and sort of bring back into my collection sort of forgotten 80s kind of indie book. Now, speaking of books, I'm going to end this with a couple actual books. This one's not really comic related, but it's something cool, and it's an inspiration for me for my series, The Crime Busters. The comic I do, it's just kind of like my ode to like amateur detectives, like teen detectives and Scooby-Doo and stuff like that. And the big inspiration are 2 series of novels that I read as a kid that I loved and collected the full run. One was the Trixie Belden series, but the other was this. It's The Three Investigators, and this is book number 23, The Mystery of the Invisible Dog. Now, I had the complete run, and this was the edition that was coming out when I was a kid. So this is the version that I had as a kid of this book. And it's a really beat up copy. I did read a little bit of it. I haven't really gotten too far into it. I found this at basically the equivalent of a little free library where you could take books and donate books. Obviously, as soon as I saw this, I took it. I didn't have anything to donate, but next time I'm near a little free library, I'll throw in a book to sort of even the scales. But it was really exciting to get this. It's really tan. It's got water damage. It's creased and beat up. It's also a library book, and it journeyed a ways to get to me because I found this in Leominster, Massachusetts. I don't know if you can read that, but it's actually from the North Conway Library, and North Conway is in sort of northern New Hampshire. So I don't know how it ended up in Leominster, and also it's got the library card still in the front, And the last time it was checked out there was February of 1996. So it's been 28 years since this was checked out of the library in North Conway, New Hampshire, and somehow it ended up with me. So that's pretty exciting for me. The only other one of these that I currently own is the first book. I got a copy of book number 1 when I was on my honeymoon in New Zealand. So that's also a strange place for me to find that. But whenever I see these, which is very rarely, obviously, since I only have 2 of them, or any of the Trixie Belden books, I get them because it would be cool to sort of put the runs back together. I do enjoy reading them to sort of get inspiration for the Crime Busters, so very exciting to get this. Finally, though, I want to end with this cool book. Let me pull it out of the sleeve. I was at an antique store here in town, and I found this. It's Brenda Starr, Girl Reporter. Now, this is a 1943 novelization that's adapting a 1941 storyline from the Brenda Starr comic strip by Dale Messick. So it's a prose book. However, throughout the book, there are illustrations by Dale Messick. And so there's quite a few of them. Let me find some more here to show you. Might take me a second. Like, throughout the book, we get these different illustrations. Some of them actually have Brenda Starr in the pictures. For some reason, the ones that I keep flipping to are like, here she is sleeping, surrounded by people that look like Dick Tracy. There's some really good art in here, and obviously, I couldn't pass this up. Like as soon as I saw the cover, I was like, oh, yeah. So here's a cool pin-up from Dale Messick of Brenda Starr. Yeah, so 1943, again, as soon as I saw this cover, I was like, it's mine. It was $9, which, is great. I think I've already gotten $9 of value just leafing through and looking at the pictures and just having it sort of in my collection on my bookshelf. So that I was really excited to get that. That's something cool that I've never seen before. But that's it for this time. Again, you can check out my Kickstarter, quest.com. A week from today is the end of my Kickstarter, so I'll be having a live stream next Friday. But between now and then, I'll have another regular video where I'm showing off some back issues. Not sure what that's going to be yet. So let me know what you think of this stuff down below, and I'll see you next time.